So to read is very challenging. So if I stumbled.
Thank you. Richard, you get to... First off, thanks everybody for being here. I didn't know this many people were going to be here personally. I mean, Richard probably did, but I didn't.
Surprise rally.
I am so excited to welcome my good friend, Senator Rick Scott, back to the Columbia Restaurant. It's no surprise that Senator Scott and our good friends, we've both been married to our childhood sweethearts for over 50 years. We're both business guys that have struggled along our way to be where we are today. We don't want Democrat socialist policies running Florida business. Senator Scott is living proof that anyone can achieve the American dream. Then he ran for the governor of our state, and without ever having any political backing. He grew up in public housing, got his first job at a very young age to help support his mother. As governor, Senator Scott turned Florida's economy around. He's a defender of freedom and will always fight against to impose socialist policies on Floridians. As a governor, Senator Scott turned Florida's economy around. He's a defender of freedom and will always fight back against attempts to impose socialist policies. I'm proud to have a businessman and family man like Senator Scott represent Florida up in Washington. Leaders like Senator Scott invest in and support law enforcement. This is so important for businesses like our family business that we have around the state of Florida. I'm glad to have my friend Senator Scott here today. Look forward to keeping him in the Senate for 6 more years. Senator Scott launched his latest campaign with a simple message: I will never stop fighting against socialist agenda in Washington. Senator Scott is a person I hold in the highest esteem and respect, and God bless him and guide him in saving our country. Thank you very much for being here.
Good job.
Well, thank you so much, everyone who showed up for our surprise rally. I think the senator was really excited, and we got him. He was surprised. You know,
No idea.
it's like a surprise birthday party. So fun. Well, it is really an honor as the Attorney General of Florida to stand here with so many sheriffs, police chiefs, law enforcement officers, prosecutors, our esteemed, awesome former Attorney General, Pam Bondi. She achieved so many things while in office to protect this state, and I often say, you know, they say you come along and you have to stand in the shoes of the person that came before you and they help make it possible. Well, I have to stand in really, really high heels. And we just still adore her, and I think it speaks volumes that she would take time to be here to support this great senator. And and everyone here that showed up to surprise him knows that Senator Scott is a friend and a fighter. A friend and fighter, and I think that so defines him. He is our friend because how many times, I think everybody standing up here, including me, including Pam Bondi when you were in office and he was the governor, a tragedy happens, a challenge happens, we're in an emergency, and who is the first person on the phone? This guy. He's always there for you, even in the moments that you can't even find your phone because something's happened so fast. You know exactly where it is because it's ringing, and it's Senator Scott. And he so cares about this state and this country. In fact, he knows through struggles is where we define and achieve our greatest successes. And you can just look at his life, which is emblematic of that. He grew up in a single-family home. He enlisted in the Navy because he wanted to go to college, and he knew that he could use that GI Bill and put himself through college, and he did that. And still knowing that the greatest successes come through struggle, you know what his first job was? He bought a struggling donut shop that wasn't going to make it. And with his perseverance and his attention to detail and pure grit, he made that donut shop a success. And he did it again. He is the definition of the American dream. He is our friend and fighter. And why do we need a fighter right now at this moment in history? because everyone up here, standing here today, would tell you, like no other moment in time in our history, we are losing more Americans due to the lawlessness and chaos at our border and across the cities and states around this nation under this president, under this administration, than in any other moment in time in our history. And that takes a fighter. And this man has proven he will, in the middle of chaos, in the middle of what seems like a daunting challenge, that's where he shines and does his best work. He knows that in order to succeed in our communities, we have to have good education, we have to have good jobs, but in order to have that, we have to have safe communities. So from protecting our kids at school, to protecting our seniors, to defending law enforcement, he has always had our back as a senator in Washington. And when anything is coming down and we're trying to defend against radical nonsense policies that some people are pushing down the throats of Americans, he calls and says, "What is this?" And as soon as he hears that we don't support it and law enforcement cannot be successful under that policy, he's like, "Well, I'm against it." He understands better than anyone that a good defense to this radical nonsense is a good offense. And so we need him as our offense in Washington. As our friend and fighter, we need Senator Scott in Washington fighting for Florida, and let's be honest, fighting for America. So I give to you, without further ado, U.S. Senator and former Florida Governor Rick Scott.
Well, first off, thanks everybody for coming. So I didn't know everybody was going to be here. I knew the press would be here, and I knew the individuals, the sheriffs, and the state attorneys, and Pam and Ashley, and some others were going to be here. But thanks everybody for coming. It's a real honor to be supported by law enforcement. You know, when in my generation, you know, first off, if you ever got stopped by law enforcement, if they weren't the problem, your mom was the problem. And you did nothing wrong. And you were told that you need to trust law enforcement because they were there to keep you safe. And if you look at our state, why do people want to be here? They're here for one reason, because we have great law enforcement, and we have great attorney generals, we have great state attorneys, we have great police chiefs, we enforce our laws. There was a CNN reporter recently asked a gang member up in New York, they said, "So why do you steal from people in New York, go party in Florida, and come back?" And they said, "Well, because if we got caught in Florida, we'd be in jail." That's emblematic of exactly what's happening to our country. So I just want to thank some individuals here. So I love business, and people don't realize how difficult it is to be in business. You've got to find what customers want. You've got to have a consistent product. You've got to find great people to work with, because you can't do it by yourself. And Richard Gonsmark and his family has done it for how many generations, Richard?
We're 5 generations now.
5th generation. It's hard to do that with one generation, right? But 5 generations. And when I met Richard for the first time, you know, what I like about him is his unbelievable passion for this country. And the passion to have the opportunity to build businesses because it changes people's lives. The passion to be able to give people a good paying job. So first of all, I think it's one thing we need to all do is we need to really appreciate the people who are willing to put their lives online, put their money up, and go build businesses, because that creates all this opportunity for all of us. And thank God for this country where we have entrepreneurs. I hope everybody stays for lunch and has the 1905 salad. So it's really good and it's healthy. I want to thank Ashley Moody. I got to work with Pam Bondi we got elected together. We neither had run for office together. And what you find out very quickly is how important the Attorney General is. If you don't have a good Attorney General, it really has an impact on what happens around the state and the enforcement laws, the relationship with law enforcement. And Ashley Moody has done an unbelievable job taking care of this state and making sure and fighting for the right principles. So first, I want to thank Ashley for being here. Thank you. And I want to thank Pam Bondi. Pam and I listened to my mom, so I never actually had problems with law enforcement. So Pam Bondi had a background as a prosecutor. So we had the opportunity to work together. I primarily, the cabinet meetings was focused on how we get more jobs. She was focused on how do we keep people safe. And so she was great to work with for the entire time. She's become a great family friend, good friend of my daughters, and knows my grandkids, and she clearly is a good friend of my wife, so I just want to thank Pam for being here. So we're going to hear from a lot of state attorneys, and we're going to hear from a lot of sheriffs, or a few sheriffs, and we're going to hear from police chief. Every one of these individuals are individuals that are trying to keep you safe. You know, nobody wakes up every day and says, gosh, I'm really excited to prosecute somebody, right? That's not the way it works. Nobody's excited about arresting people, right? But guess what? Thank God they're willing to do it, right? And they often get treated like crap, right? They're spit on, they're not treated well. You know, it's a tough job. Whether you're in law enforcement, as a policeman or a sheriff, or whether you're a state trooper, whatever your job is, or whether you're in the prosecution side, it's not an easy job. But what we're blessed in this state is the reason why I think we're now at a 52, are we 50-year low? 52-year low in our crime rate. When I left, Pam and I left, we were 47-year low. It's because of these people, right? And this is, and this is a team sport, right? And what you have to appreciate as you get to know this, and I didn't know hardly anything about this when I ran for governor. I ran on jobs, and then I ran on jobs, and then I ran on jobs. What you find is if our sheriffs didn't work with the other members of law enforcement, police chiefs, and our state troopers, and everybody else, and if they didn't have great state attorneys, you know, and if we didn't have mayors that really cared about making sure our state was safe, this place would be a different place. You go around the state of Florida, I mean, there's places where people make mistakes and commit crimes, but they're prosecuted. And so I just want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank you for their support. As Attorney General Ashley Moody said, you know, your federal government's sort of out of control. So let me just let me just talk about some of the things. I mean, they're doing. I mean, we have sanctuary cities in this country. We've had over 8 million people across our southern border, completely unvetted. We're losing over 70,000 people of fentanyl a year, over 100,000 people of drug overdoses a year. We have our federal government we are doing political prosecution. The people that work at FBI, DOJ, there's wonderful people. But often you can't understand exactly why they would do this and they don't do that. Some people there become ideologues. All that stuff is wrong. One thing I try to do as governor, and Pam Bondi did the same thing, and I watch Ashley, she's doing the same thing at the state level, and I'm trying to do at the federal level, listen to law enforcement. When they talk about passing legislation, either at the state or the federal level, law enforcement are the individuals who are going to tell you how it's going to work. And if you don't listen to them, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. You can't walk up and say, oh man, I became an expert on this, when you didn't have any background in it. So some of the things I've worked on at the federal level, we finally got passed, which is remarkable. We have a bill called the End Fentanyl Act. First off, Border Patrol tries to do their job. Unfortunately, the Biden administration does not allow them to do their job. But they weren't even updating their manuals to deal with the new drugs. I remember when Pam was the Attorney General, constantly, the new drugs that were coming into our country, they constantly have to come up with how to change it, change our laws to be able to crack down on it. So we now have a bill that is going to require every 3 years for the Border Patrol to start updating all the drugs and how they interdict it and how they deal with it. So I think that's positive. I have a bill that first off, if you go around this country, and you look at schools, let me tell you the difference. Our schools are safe. Our schools are safe. There's fences. There's law enforcement at our public schools. I'm shocked when I go around the country where there's no fencing. There's no single point of entry. There's no school resource officers, right? That's not true in Florida. I mean, one law enforcement was doing it before we passed the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act, but after that, we provided state funding, and they've continued to expand it since Pam and I have left. This state, knock on wood, this state is a state where you can feel comfortable sending your child to school. Now you got to be diligent, and we've set up processes that they follow it with our school officials, with our law enforcement, to really watch people. But I've got a bill. How many of you want more IRS agents? I don't think so. So the Democrats passed a bill to add 87,000 more IRS agents. So we could take that money and put a school resource officer in every school, not just public schools, so we didn't talk about every school in the country. I haven't gotten that bill passed, but I'm going to continue to work on that. We have, the Parkland families, if you've gotten to know them at all, many of them have stayed very active, because what their goal is, it never happens again. So they've worked on a variety of legislation at the state level. They've done at the federal level. One is called the Easels Act, which would require the Secret Service to do, through their National Threat Assessment Center, to do greater focus on school safety. But there's a lot of these families that you really have to admire them. Our sheriffs have gotten to know them, even if they weren't down in the Parkland area, because they've really tried to make the whole state a safe place and the country a safe place. And it's hard to get legislation passed. So some of the things that I'm going to continue to work on: completely oppose this defunding police idea. I mean, I want somebody to show up if something happens in my family, right? I think we all do. So this idea that we want to defund the police and there's a better way, unless we all are going to carry guns and have somebody watch our houses all the time and our business all the time. Thank God. So we're going to have to keep fighting that. There are a lot of federal programs, and we try to work with all law enforcement to try to work for those, to get those grant programs directed to the state as much as we can. We all have to continue to work to crack down on rogue prosecutors. I mean, the bottom line is, if you take the job and your job is to prosecute. You don't get to pick and choose what you prosecute. I mean, you have. I mean, look, and it's hard. I mean, nobody wakes up and wants to do this, but they know how important it is to their family and other families. We need to have strict minimum sentences for assaults against law enforcement. We need tougher penalties for violent criminals. All these things I'm going to continue to work on. It was like probably about 3 years ago, they tried to get rid of qualified immunity. Yeah. So here's the other thing you should really admire about Florida law enforcement. Florida law enforcement is active in all the national groups, like the Major Sheriff's Association, things like that. If it wasn't for their tenacity, that would have passed. But we were able to stop it, and we got to continue to do that. Or if you're in law enforcement, you're putting your whole family's life savings at risk. That's not fair to you. We need to make it a federal crime to pursue prosecution on political ideology. I mean, that's what you do in Latin America, right? I mean, you try to put your opponent in prison. I mean, you can't do that. And if you do that, that should be a federal crime. So the bottom line is, if you need something, it's my job. I work this job every day. Sometimes it's a real challenge. Today I'll be back in D.C. and we're going to have the Mayorkas impeachment this week. And the Democrats are going to try to say we don't want to have a trial. Okay, they were fine to have a trial with Trump, but God forbid we have a trial with Mayorkas. But we'll see. So we got a variety of things. But if you want to get involved, you can go to rickscott.com. Use the website. It took me a long time to get it. Hope you'll use it. Lindsey Graham had his forever, and so I figured we finally got that done. But I just want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank all my friends in law enforcement for all your support. You have to really admire Florida law enforcement. They do a great job. So now I get to introduce my friend, former Attorney General Pam Bondi. I just want to say that I was blessed to get to serve with her for 8 years, because she taught me a lot about how to work through law enforcement, things I hope, as a kid, I never wanted to have to do, and I made my mom proud, so I didn't have to. So, but your Attorney General, former Attorney General, Pam Bondi.
And Rick, we miss your mom every day. and my mom is here today. My secret weapon. I was the blessed one to get to work with this brilliant businessman every day for 8 years, and I saw firsthand all the jobs he brought to our state, everything he did for our state. But more than that, I saw how he supported our law enforcement, and to all our great men and women today here in law enforcement, our great prosecutors, our attorney general, thank you for fighting the fight every day. And Rick fought that fight every day. He didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk. Anything you needed, that's why you're all here today. Anything you needed, we needed, fentanyl, human trafficking, any issue, Rick Scott was there to back you up, and now he's there in the U.S. Senate to back you up. He has never, ever wavered on his commitment to law enforcement. So, former governor, U.S. Senator, current Rick Scott, thank you, Rick, for everything that you do for our country now and continue to do.
I want to thank Pam again for being here. Now we're going to hear from State Attorney Susie Lopez.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator, and welcome back to Hillsborough County. Good morning, everyone. It is an honor to stand here today with our Attorney General, our former Attorney General and my former colleague, my fellow state attorneys, sheriffs, and so many friends in our law enforcement community. I am happy to endorse Senator Rick Scott for his reelection. For me, it's quite simple. Senator Scott stands behind law enforcement, and he fights every day to keep our families safe. He knows that Floridians don't support the soft-on-crime policies that are tearing apart Democrat-led cities and states. In Washington, Senator Scott is a leading voice against rogue prosecutors and dangerous ideas, like he said, defunding the police, that put law enforcement and our families at risk. In Florida, we enforce the law, we hold criminals accountable, and we support our law enforcement. And as our former governor and now as our senator, the men and women of law enforcement have always been able to count on Rick Scott. That's why I'm backing him, and I look forward to continuing to work with him to keep criminals off of the streets. Senator Rick Scott stands for law enforcement, and we in law enforcement stand for Senator Rick Scott. Thank you very much, and I would now like to introduce my sheriff, Hillsborough County Sheriff Chad Cronister.
Thank you. How lucky am I to have a state attorney like that? It's a true privilege and a pleasure to welcome each and every one of you. It's an honor to stand beside my fellow sheriffs, our former Attorney General, our local elected officials. I have to thank our county commissioner. Thank you for being here. And Senator, I have to introduce you to our great community, our Tampa community that understands the prosperity of any community starts and ends with law and order, and that's what you have here today. Thank you to each and every one of you. I met Senator Scott when I was appointed by him, and take back to 2017. And the previous sheriff was outgoing. I was incoming in a few months, and there was a hurricane coming. And the previous sheriff said, hey, they don't want to hear from me. I'm a has-been. Get in there and talk to then Governor Scott and figure out what you're doing with the hurricane. So I couldn't even get the words out because the butterflies were about up to here to my chin, thinking, okay, how are we going to handle this? This is my coming out party here as a sheriff. But I tell you what, we instantly learned that we had a true friend in Rick Scott. And I'm sure every single sheriff around me can tell you a similar story. So the hurricane's bearing down, and it was him who was making sure we were staging electrical workers and power line workers out at the fairgrounds. So when the hurricane went by, he wanted power restored in record time. It was him who made sure that we kept the fuel coming in and everyone had fuel, so we didn't have a 3-hour wait after the hurricane passed. We didn't close it till we absolutely had to. That was under his guidance, his direction. When he called and said, hey, we need some troopers, we need some deputies because we have to escort them down the highway. We're going to we're going to go counterflow and come down the interstate to get these utilities and resources. It was Senator Scott who had that vision and leadership. And General Moody mentioned the fact that he's the first one that calls. I had to make sure I met with my command staff. Right after I got a phone call, there was a fire at the port. And the first phone call I got wasn't from my own administration. It was from then Governor Scott. And now I get the same phone calls, Senator Scott, wanting to know something. So I made sure they knew the next time I got a phone call wanting to know about a fire at the port, and I didn't know before the governor or the senator knew that there were going to be some issues. Senator Scott, you are compassionate, you are passionate, and you are tireless. And we couldn't be more fortunate. So on behalf of every sheriff who endorsed you, and I say it all the time, there's no upside to endorsing a candidate, right? You endorse someone doesn't like them, well, maybe they don't like you now either. But you have to stand proud with a U.S. senator who fights for what's right, regardless of the odds, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the political headwind. He does what's right. Your common sense approach, Senator, is what helps continue to keep our Florida community safe. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sheriff. You've done a great job. This is a good community. I have a daughter that lives here with 5 boys, and so I make sure they know the sheriff. And I tell them the exact same thing my mom told me. They better know the sheriff because they met him somewhere, not because for any other reason. The oldest is not the best listener, by the way. So now we introduce Chris Nako. So I met Chris probably in the election maybe in 2010, probably. And so I had the opportunity to appoint him, and Sheriff Nako has done a great job. We talk about these hurricanes. Pasco gets flooding, even without a hurricane. And so Sheriff and I have hit the same poor area, I don't know, sometimes 4 or 5 times. You feel so sorry for these families. But, the goal for everybody up here, I can just tell you, the goal for everybody up here in these hurricanes is keep everybody alive. I mean, you have to really admire, and it takes everybody to do it. But we had 4 unbelievable hurricanes when I was governor, and everybody worked their butt off to keep everybody alive. And these guys all did a great job. So now, Sheriff Chris Nako.
All right, so I'm going to start by saying the quiet thing out loud. I know when you heard that Senator Scott had a donut shop, and you see us all up here. Yes, that bond was created when all those cops kept coming in there, and his business, his profits kept growing. He's like, I like these guys, good people. So I know that Florida is an unbelievable state, and we are blessed to have phenomenal leaders. And anybody who's been in Florida for numerous years realize why we need Senator Scott still up there, because they remember him as a governor. But the one thing about Florida, which is unique, is that we are booming. There's a lot of people that moved into Florida since 2018 that never had to vote for Senator Scott. And I say this, I'm a Floridian by choice and by marriage, so I'm blessed by both. I would never want to go back to where I grew up. It is so sad. And I will say this to everybody who just moved into Florida in the past several years. Remember where you came from, and don't let Florida become that. No. There's so many things that I could point to with Senator Rick Scott. Everybody keeps going back to the point where, he gives them the call. I will say this about his office. His office and him work phenomenally well. If you call him, things get done. There was a city in North Florida when a hurricane went through. When that hurricane went through, the power went out. There were many residents in that city. The power company was slow, dragging their feet. When he was governor, He put his foot down and said, get that power back on. He made sure that power was put back on. It's not just rhetoric. He really does those things. You know, as a law enforcement officer, he makes sure that we can do our jobs. That's all we want to do. Sometimes we're right and sometimes we're wrong. And when we're wrong, we will admit it. But when we're right, we need people to stand by us. And that's what he does for us. I can tell you, Florida does not have Florida problems. Florida has federal problems. Those federal problems keep coming down. But Rick Scott has that shield. He's protecting us. He's pushing back on those problems. That's what Senator Rick Scott does for us. And I'm telling everybody, please, if you've just moved into Florida in the past 6 years and you haven't experienced him as governor and now you know him as senator, but you see his name on the ballot, I'm begging you as a Floridian, I'm begging you as a sheriff, and I'm begging you as a father who has kids in the state, vote for him. Because we want Florida to succeed. We want Florida to keep moving forward, and we want Florida to be that destination place where everybody keeps going. So please support Senator Rick Scott. And the other one, too, is as a proud Tampa Bay resident, please support the Columbia restaurant. Because this is, it's a phenomenal restaurant and phenomenal people, so thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. The food is good, really good here, by the way. And the people are wonderful. You know, I mean, I just tell you, being the governor is a great job. And you have the opportunity to have a positive influence on a lot of people. And so that's what, as a group, that's what we all tried to do. Everybody up here is trying to have a positive impact. Whether you're a state rep or you're a state senator or you're whatever your job is, everybody's trying to have a positive impact. And the other thing is, if you look at everybody up here, they all work together. And if we didn't work together, we wouldn't get things done because it's a team sport. So again, I want to thank everybody. Next we get to hear from Police Chief Melanie Bevan. We got to, I don't know what you know, I've done this, I ran in 10, and so I've met people over the years, but Chief Bevan is just a wonderful person, and she cares about law enforcement, she cares about her community, and she cares about making sure this is a great state. Police Chief Melanie Bevan.
Well, good morning, everyone. I see that I am truly the last one up here that is standing between you and a 1905 salad. And he mentioned he was buying, so I don't know anything about that. As you said, my name is Melanie Bevan, and I am a 38-year law enforcement veteran currently serving. I currently serve as the chief of the Bradenton Police Department. I also have the honor of serving on the executive board of the Florida Police Chiefs Association, whom I am representing today. The Florida Police Chiefs Association is comprised of over 1,300 of the state's top law enforcement executives. They have members from every region of the state and agencies of all shapes and sizes, representing the diversity of our communities across Florida. Membership in the FPCA supports and maintains the highest standards of public safety, law enforcement professionalism, and accountability, which is why we, the Florida Police Chiefs Association, are incredibly honored to stand here today with Florida's Attorney General Ashley Moody to reaffirm our endorsement of Rick Scott for re-election to the U.S. Senate. Senator Scott has worked alongside police chiefs since he served as governor of Florida. He knows our private joke. I used to call him my Lovener because he was always the first one on the phone, always there, reaching out, asking what he could do to help. He responded to a multitude of crises during that time, everything that you've heard about from hurricane preparation, recovery, school safety, the spread of fentanyl. Probably every single police chief in the state has his personal number, and for years, you know you're going to get that call from him first. We've all been there. Very clearly, Senator Scott knows that supporting the brave men and women in blue who put their lives at risk every day is the first step to keeping Florida's community safe. And his support is so much more than just words. As our senator, he's fought for strict mandatory minimum sentences for criminals who assault law enforcement officers. He's fought to fund programs that support officers and their families, like disaster relief, and he is relentlessly fighting to keep the illegal immigration that is harming our great country. I was born and raised in this great state. I met and married my wife. I raised my children, and I deeply, deeply care about the safety and security of my family, of my friends, of my colleagues, and everyone in my city whom I serve and whom I protect. And it is evident to me, so does Senator Scott. The Florida Police Chief Association knows that Senator Scott has law enforcement's back, and we're proud to have his. Florida is also fortunate to have Ashley Moody as our Attorney General. Attorney General Moody, another hometown hero to the association, has devoted her entire She's devoted her entire professional career to enforcing justice, promoting law and order, preserving the safety of our communities, and upholding the rule of law. The simple fact is that good law enforcement becomes better when all of our stakeholders, our elected officials, our partner agencies, our state and local governments communicate and coordinate toward the same shared goal, that of a stronger and safer Florida. By working together so closely, Attorney General Moody and Senator Scott consistently deliver on the issues that law enforcement cares about the most, and frankly, what every citizen in this state should care about. We look forward to continuing our work with Senator Scott and General Moody on behalf of law enforcement throughout the state and the people of the state of Florida. Thank you.
You know, if you just all think about it individually, what you care about, you think about your families, right? First thing you think about. And when anything bad happens, you internalize it by thinking about a family member, right? We all do. That's what we do. And so what Chief Bevan said is that many of the individuals up here have to run for office, right? So if you want good law enforcement, if you want great sheriffs, if you want great police chiefs, if you want great state attorneys, if you want county commissioners, state senators, state reps to take care of and all work together, you got to go elect them. I mean, if you don't, you're going to get what New York's getting, or you're getting what Chicago's getting. And so, what you see down here, especially you can see it in our schools, people are coming here because they're sick and tired of what's going on in these big cities. I was at an event last night in my hometown in Naples, and almost everybody there was from Minnesota. And they're all down here. I mean, it's really dangerous. I mean, they dramatically reduced funding for the police. Crime's skyrocketed. So we all have to work together. So I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank everybody for your support. And thank you for the surprise of how many people are here today. I've always appreciated it. Thanks. Okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you. No, thank you. Okay, thank you for coming.